Before we begin completing the square, I want to take sort of a little baby step into the process and talk about how to find what I call the magic number, or more specifically, I guess, or more technically, we're going to look for a value of c that makes a perfect square trinomial. But doesn't magic number just sound a little more fun? So here's my trinomial down here, and what I want to do is find that value of c. There's a little formula, I have it over here to the side, that's going to help us find that c value. And it says to take half of b, to do b divided by 2, and then square the result. Okay? So as I take a look at this trinomial then, recall that a, b, and c are just those three values right there. So b should be the coefficient of the x term. So I'm going to take 16, according to my formula, and take half of that divided by 2. That, of course, gets me 8. Then I'll take that number in parentheses, that's very important if that number comes up negative, and square it. 8 squared is going to get me 64. And so what I'm going to say then, I'll just replace it. I'll just literally write over c with 64. And I'll say that's the number I'm looking for. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, what makes it so magical? What was so great about that? Well, glad you asked, Internet people, because what this magic number lets us do is it now allows us to factor. That's kind of the key to this process. So what I'll do is I'm going to now be able to factor this trinomial, and watch how it factors because it's kind of special. So since there's a 1 in front, I can just ask myself what two numbers multiply to 64, the c value I just found, and at the same time add up to 16. Well, as I think through what numbers might work, hopefully fairly quickly I can discover that it's 8 and 8. So in other words, I could factor this into x plus 8 times x plus 8, or if I'm looking to save a little bit of time, I could factor this into x plus 8 squared. And that's where the name actually comes from, this completing the square process we'll take a look at in the next video. That squared comes from the fact that anytime I do this little magic number trick, I'll always be able to factor into something squared, something times itself. And then one other little thing you may want to notice before we try one more example. If you're having a hard time factoring, or if you're dealing with one that has fractions or decimals in it, this number right here, this positive 8 that we factored into, is there any other spot on the paper or page where you saw an 8 and hopefully you see it right there? That will always be the case. The number you got after you divided by 2 but before you squared it will always be the number that works out in your parentheses when you factor. Okay, let's go ahead and try one more example over here. Again, I want to find that magic number, or the value of c, that makes a perfect square trinomial. My formula says to take the b value, which is -8, and divide that by 2. That gets me -4, and then you square that, and always square in parentheses. And so I said it was especially important when you have a negative value right there. -4 times -4 is going to be a positive 16. In fact, the magic number will always be something positive, because when you multiply a number by itself, it will always come out positive. So I'll go ahead and replace c with 16, and now remember, the whole reason we did that, the whole point of this, is it allows us to factor. And so I want to find two numbers that multiply to 16 and at the same time add up to -8. And if you paid attention in that last example, you'll know that this number, if you can't think of it, it's already on the paper. Multiply to 16, add up to -8 is going to be -4. So I'll factor this into x minus 4 times x minus 4, or simply x minus 4 squared. That's where the name comes from for completing the square. And if you can do this step, what we'll do in the next video is go ahead and put all this together, use this little baby step as a first step, I guess, in solving some more quadratic equations.